Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Kidney Coach YouTube channel. I am naturopath Fiona Chin, co-founder of Kidney Coach and Cogenesis, a range of supplements made for people diagnosed with chronic kidney disease who are looking for some safe alternatives that aren't pharmaceutical driven to help support their kidney disease. And I'm joined again today by one of my favorite guests, Stephanie Modavis. Stephanie is just a well and wonder of a person. I think really, instead of talking about all the things you do, I mean, she's a mindset coach, health coach, yoga instructor, but that all aside, what Stephanie really is a master of is she has navigated the journey through chronic kidney disease, having had dialysis twice, a transplant twice, and then if you're looking at this very well, vibrant woman on the other end of your screen, you would be correct in thinking that of just how she's gone through and navigated all of this. The other amazing thing about Stephanie, we were just talking about this before we hit record, is she has been in the trenches of the medical establishment and really trying for a very long time. And I just want, Stephanie, to give you credit because I know that when you've been in that, you don't get that feedback and all those things. But she's been pushing so hard for you, the patient, to try and get really good mentorship and care programs in the back end for anyone navigating their way through dialysis and transplant. And I know she's been hit with roadblocks from the medical establishment that are so just, transplant, off you go, life will be great, have dialysis, this is just what happens. And Stephanie's been 8+ years been really trying to push to have people properly supported through the process, so the process isn't so trauma-driven and that people are being given the tools to properly heal. And that is what Stephanie's passionate about. It's what she's been really driving. And I feel very fortunate that we snatched her up, got her to join the Kidney Coach team. She's one of our coaches. So anyone out there listening, if you've been doing anything with the Kidney Coach program and supplements, if you want someone to help walk you through all of this and just know how to navigate it and to really get the most out of your process, and Stephanie's the person I'd go to. So Stephanie, thank you again for being here and sharing your wisdom and signing up for, if that's a thing, before we, I don't know if that's a thing, that meme that goes around where we're like, I didn't read the fine print of my life journey. Like, what am I signing up for? And Stephanie obviously signed up for something pretty crazy, but the beauty of it is she's here and she's bringing it back to people to really transform and help and support other people, which is, I think, the peak of what you can do when you've been through a pretty traumatic process. So I'm going to stop talking and hand it across to you, Stephanie.
Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here with you guys. As you know, I love what you do. I wish I would have found you many, many years ago when you guys existed, when I needed this work. But definitely, I'm here to share my knowledge, my wisdom. When I first went on my journey, I was completely lost, and I was at the behest of what the nurses said or the dialysis techs, and doctor to doctor, visit to visit, hospital to hospital. And I really had no idea what was going on. And after many years, when I received my transplant, I was told, get on with your life. You survived. You're one of the lucky ones. Go get him, kid. Can't wait to see what you do with your life. And lo and behold, that was when I realized that I'm not just a physical body. I knew I wasn't just a physical body before that. But going through the medical system and really just succumbing to how they operate, my old career of being a yoga teacher kind of went to the wayside, because when it comes to severe health issues, it becomes very physical very fast. So after that transplant, I woke up and realized, wait a minute, I'm better, but why on the inside do I feel like my healing has just begun? So that started another 5+ year process of literally trying to understand what just happened to me. Where did all of my 20s go? What do I do now? Who am I now? So I try to share so people can maybe save a little bit of time. Everybody goes through their process on their own speed, but definitely I think sharing wisdom and knowledge can help if people resonate with that. So today I was going to share a little PowerPoint, a presentation that I made. I love making these little presentations.
I love your presentations. I think they're great.
I make them because I tend to go off topic, so they keep me on track. So
I love
yeah. So today I wanted to talk about from being a patient to moving towards what I call a self-healer, the Crucible of kidney disease. So kidney disease for most of us who've had it is not just a short acute situation. It's something that goes on for an extended period of time, whether we're working on healing our kidney disease, reducing the numbers and doing what we can to try to find, living with a healthier kidney function, or if we proceed down another route where we do need to go on dialysis and working on healing from that potentially, that's now a potential, which it wasn't really before. Or even if somebody goes through the transplant process, as I did, there's still a lot of other things to be aware of. So in hindsight, I like to share what I've learned to help. And becoming a self-healer wasn't something that, again, in the beginning of my journey, I really didn't know where I fit into my process in the Western medical model. Really, it was about me showing up with a diagnosis. I had a label, and then getting the proper testing and just literally putting myself to the side to let them continue to diagnose the treatment protocol that I needed. And that was a mistake. When you're sick and you're vulnerable and you don't know up from down and you're terrified and you've been diagnosed with kidney disease, I think the brain goes into a fight or flight mode many times, or a functional freeze. So it's hard to have that hindsight to wait, how do I belong here in this process as well?
Absolutely. I think it's funny, we were talking about this before we hit record. We were talking about complex post-traumatic stress syndrome and post-traumatic stress syndrome in general. And I think the diagnostics for it is you have to have one of the big capital T's. And lots of the medical professions see that as, veterans, maybe if you've been raped, they're the big, or, been under, like, abducted or something like that. But it's funny, I had a patient that I just spoke to a couple of days ago, and she was diagnosed with muscle dystrophy, ended up being a parasite, but didn't know that for 19 years. A course of antibiotics resolved it, but she had 19 years of her muscles degrading in front of her, being wheelchair bound, nearly dying and losing, respiratory function and all those sort of things that go with muscle dystrophy. And the finding out that it was a simple parasite, that if it was treated 19 years before, she would have had 19 years of her life, but, all of that sort of stuff. And she said, I've got complex post-traumatic stress syndrome. I said, I'd fall over if you didn't, and I think the same goes, and that's an extreme version, but I think kidney disease and anything, and you went through it, and you went through it twice. How can you not be traumatized by that? You can't. It's just something that happens. So I think that's absolutely fair to have that diagnosis.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need to talk about that in another episode for sure, because there's many things that happen along the journey that contribute to those little hits that do create a lot of fear and a lot of trauma. And I think that's part of the future in terms of treating kidney disease as well. So I just wrote a little quote here that says, "My disease showed me the path to my healing and wholeness," which is, it's hard to conceptually wrap your head around that when maybe you're first being diagnosed, or you're just thinking to yourself, well, what do I eat to get better? How do I get better? What do I do? There is this much larger process going on that usually people learn in hindsight. But my goal here is to try to encourage people to continue to bring yourself to show up in every appointment, no matter if you're afraid or you're uncertain or you're having to start dialysis or whatever it is that you're doing. Don't abandon yourself and just completely surrender to the hospital medical model, because then you're abandoning something that will need to be processed later quite extensively when you kind of want to reintegrate from this. But show up with yourself. Don't forget yourself. Don't forget your feelings. Don't just show up and listen to what everyone has to say. Be that participant in your process, even when you're uncertain of exactly where it's going. So I just wanted to talk about the crucible of illness, kidney disease for
Can
me.
you
Again,
play? I can't. I'm still on your front screen, so it hasn't moved along for me.
Oh, it hasn't? Okay. All right. Let me go back.
Sorry.
You're still on my
Don't mind.
front screen. No, thank you. Let's see here. My tech skills. Okay. Let me see if
Hang on.
this works.
Yeah.
That works?
No.
Did it move? Did it move?
No, it normally does. Normally you've hit on what my tech skills would agree with you, the play button. But there, I can
Okay.
see the next. So that's
I think
good.
I'll keep it like this if it's not too distracting. For some reason, it's not wanting to move in full screen.
That's
Is
all
that
good.
okay? Is that okay
Yeah.
to keep it like this? Okay. All right. We'll do that. People can get a little sneak peek if they have really good eyes. So, so again, kidney disease itself for me was a profound catalyst for transformation on every level. And again, when we're first being diagnosed and we're trying to fight the disease, we focus so much on the physical that we forget that we have an emotional body, we have a spiritual body, we have a mental body, right? So again, just throwing that out there for people who are going through this, no matter where they're at on their journey, is that there are some good things happening that you can't quite see. It's definitely, we need to remind ourselves of that, and lessons in transformation and catalysts often come in mysterious packages. Let's just say that.
Yes.
So, right.
Yes, ain't that the truth?
Right. So I want to also share with everyone again is to think about embracing the journey of you from just being a patient to you really opening up to becoming your own self-healer and really fully participating in your experience, especially when it's uncomfortable and we don't want to participate in this experience. So don't check out. Don't check out, even when it gets hard. That's one thing I want to say. There are ways that you can navigate and lean into it that will help you definitely in the long run and in the short run. Another
Well
thing
said.
here, yeah. Another thing is I really learned the art of listening to the whispers of my body and soul. So all about this subtle body stuff, I really learned when I just leaned into the discomfort and accepted that strange paradox of, I have kidney disease, I don't like it, but how do I accept it and work with it? How do I work with what I've been given? Right? When I accepted that and didn't fight it or resist it, it's like my body started whispering and talking to me in all of these subtle ways. And I started to really learn how magnificent our body is when we can just silence the fear and the resistance and just listen. I felt like my supernatural skills leveled up when I just leaned into the resistance and just listened instead of trying to run from it or fear it.
I reckon that's one of the, I don't know if you're going to go into this further down. We could do a whole podcast on that. I reckon that's one of the hardest of your points there to do personally.
To lean into the resistance?
And then make the space for your body to communicate without making the body wrong because your body's failing you.
Oh my gosh. Yes. It's like high level judo, but you have no other choice. You're thrown in. It's like you're thrown into the class without realizing that you signed up for the course. So
and
the
you're
goal,
going for your black belt without even starting at white.
that's exactly how it is. So how do we embrace that black belt status without getting too caught into the lower belts and resisting it? And it's a massive, massive, not just skill to deal with kidney disease. It's one of the most brilliant life skills. So if we can learn how to do this through our kidney disease, then you've just elevated a life skill that will, continue with you for the rest of your life.
So true.
For sure. Yeah. And then lastly on this slide, to recognize that we are all so much more than any illness. This is a huge, huge thing I talk about, is understanding that paradox of, in reality, I've been labeled as having a physical illness, right? Like here it is, but also realizing that this is a part of a much grander experience within your life. We are not just limited to this space and this time and this body, and just really to realize that, again, we're not just the body. It feels that way, and it's, very real, very tangible meat suit we have here. But the reality is, if you can just accept what's going on and work with it and work with your feelings, again, it's just like these superpowers of awareness really start to open up. So you don't want to miss that part of it. It's one of the best things about going through something so challenging. So,
Oh, so true.
all
And so
right.
hard.
Huh?
And so true and so hard.
Yeah, it's so hard. But you know what? People get catalysts in so many ways.
Mhm.
People have death in the family or, car accident. Like we all get catalysts. I think that one of the hardest things for me with kidney disease personally is that it was like a PhD length of time. Like
Yeah.
it
And I
wasn't
think
like,
that's the chronic disease thing, isn't it? You're right. We sign up for PhDs versus a quick essay.
yeah, and it's like the long term and you're in it. And as this slide says, forging and developing mental fortitude when you don't know exactly what's happening. You don't know how you're going to feel day to day at times. It's not going away anytime soon. The immense amount of uncertainty that goes along with a chronic illness. And there's no perceived time where it's going to end, so to speak,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
For some people that are able to get a transplant or recover some of their kidney function, you still have to kind of live navigating it, but it's not so in your face as when you live with a chronic disease. And literally, it's like every day is a crapshoot. And how do you find your strength and your security and your comfort when nothing is comfortable? It's next level stuff for sure. So
100%.
yeah. So forging mental fortitude was a big component of me reclaiming my sovereignty as a patient and understanding what can I do that the doctors aren't doing to help me really embrace my, I keep saying like supernatural self, but my self healership. Like maybe the doctors are working on things, but I started to really very clearly understand I can be working on these other things within myself at the same time that
Yeah.
actually are just as powerful and contribute to my physical state and how I feel. So I became in my mind, I was like, all right, this is my job. And like, this is what the doctors are working on. But then I have this thing that I'm working on. I didn't just fall victim immediately to feeling disempowered by my illness or just giving over all of the work to the doctors and not participating. Pretty early on, I realized this is my life, right? And there's something going on here and I have to really show up. So really forging that mental fortitude was hard, and especially in the beginning, because again, there's so much uncertainty. Who likes uncertainty? Nobody likes uncertainty. And we're all a little bit of a control freak no matter what we say. So,
Uh,
right? So, for me, cultivating mindfulness as a cornerstone of resilience was really crucial in developing my mental fortitude. Because again, I didn't know what was going to happen each day. So I could either be afraid of that, or I could say, what can I do to help me navigate the fact that I don't know how I'm going to feel tomorrow? And mindfulness was really something that helped me to find a state of or a sense of control, no matter what was happening outside of me or physically. So that's the power of the mind. And you know as well that the power of our mind can really make us or break us,
yeah, absolutely.
right? So I started to realize again, really working with my mental fortitude, that if I didn't, if I wasn't mindful of my thoughts, that would then become my feelings. Well, then all of a sudden I could really go into depression or feel like a victim or say, poor me, why me? Right. And I had to really observe and practice with myself, like my own scientific experiment. Like, all right, if I don't be mindful of my thoughts, this is where I'm going to end up. But if I can upstream and try to reverse engineer this and like, where did I go wrong? Oh, I didn't get enough sleep or I didn't eat well. And then I had an argument with a friend. And then like I could see the patterns. And I realized, wait a minute, if I catch myself more upstream with my thinking, I usually cannot fall into those more shadowy, complicated states of being anxious or depressed or whatever that looks like. And if anybody is anxious or depressed, I mean, it happens to all of us, I think I could assume to say. But again, if you learn to grapple with your mind, it really is helpful to being aware of when you're falling down a trap that you don't want to, you don't want to end up in that dark forest.
Such, it's so true. And, it's for anyone listening, thoughts are just that. They're thoughts. There's no truth in them, but we hand over our power and our truth to them. And then these thoughts rule our lives. And that the whole point of mindfulness, as you said, is to watch thoughts like a cloud come in, come out, and not give them and feed them any energy, which is what we all do when you've got a chronic disease and you're in fear. It's very easy to hand your power over to a thought, but a thought is just that. It's a thought. It's nothing more. It's not real. That's that skill in itself will just take you so far in life when you learn to realize thoughts are just that. They're just thoughts. And you, the observer behind the thoughts, which is the whole thing of meditation, mindfulness, Zen, Buddhism, whatever that is, when you can just realize that you're just observing a thought and where the heck did that thought come from in the first place, and I'm not going to give it any energy, thoughts just poof, they disappear. And it is skill that I practice every day, and I'm definitely nowhere near a black belt. But yeah, just the knowing, and it sounds like you have that deep knowing of just, it's just a thought and I'm not going to hand myself over to it, which is fantastic.
I mean, we all have, I think, thoughts that really try to persevere, and that may be coming from some sort of like conditioning or childhood programming. And sometimes, again, if you do some self-awareness work, you can start to identify this is actually a core wound for me, which means that it's going to try to penetrate my thought pattern quite a bit because it's a big thing in my life or my family's life, and it's going to try to come through. But I had a friend who actually was a preacher, and he used to say so nonchalantly, all thoughts are lies all the time. And when he first used to say it, it sounds so impossible to somebody who mentalizes everything. Like it's very hard for anybody who ruminates to accept, wait a minute, how could all thoughts be lies? It's like the mind wants to come in and then reassemble that thought into another thought. It can't just accept that these thoughts happen, and they happen to everybody, and they just pop in, whether based through the subconscious or conditioning or something you saw. And did you ever see that thing on social media where they have the dress and it's like some people see gold and blue and some people see like white and pink, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And they have all these little games that you can see on social media that really shows you that, the way that our brains work. And there's that other one where it's like 9 different statements that are all different statements, but you hear what you see. Did you ever see that? Where like you hear
that
what
one's
you're
so
reading.
fascinating.
It's so fascinating because it happens every time. And I try to trick myself out of hearing it. Your brain is really like, it's like a projection of like a camera, and the same thing with thoughts is like, we could have a thought of something that we saw on a billboard and don't really realize it, and it just sticks in our head and triggers a fear or something like that. So, really working on the mind, I think, is one of the most important things we can do as human beings, especially if you have an illness, because when you have a chronic illness, it's no joke. When you have kidney disease and you're facing potential dialysis or a transplant, these are life and death things. And it's very, very scary at times. And working to conquer your mind and just accept the experience that we've been given for now. Make it clear that it's not our preference, say some prayers like, don't really want to be here, but I'm here. And can you help to guide me? What am I meant to learn here? And really open the heart to what am I getting from this difficult experience over resisting it, fighting it, feeling bad for yourself, being cranky. Those are really the options we have in life. Do we go with the flow and say, what is this teaching me? Or do we condemn our lessons and be a victim to it? So, and that comes with, the latter comes with forging the mental fortitude. And then lastly, the power of knowledge helps your mental fortitude as well. When you have information and you're informed, you're not questioning, you don't feel so lost. And that's one reason why I like being a part of your team so much, is because it seems that a lot of knowledge is getting lost in translation in terms of kidney disease and running through the traditional medical system. So the more you have that power of knowledge, the better. And also, you understand very quickly, if you're working with any traditional healthcare model, that you need to become your own healthcare advocate. And you may have an advocate with you. Not everybody has 2 or 3 people on hand at all times to come to doctor's appointments with you, which is what they usually recommend. You know, if you have
Yeah.
kidney disease and you go through a transplant, I've literally heard in the assessment process, nurses tell patients, you need to have 2 or 3 people on backup at all times. And I'm thinking, well, who has 2 or 3 people on? Not everybody has 2 or 3 people on backup all the time. So that means also that at your weakest, you need to also understand how becoming your own health advocate is going to be very beneficial. And again, it changes your mind. It moves your mind out of worry and excessive fear into, okay, I got to be looking out for myself. What can I do? What do I need to learn about? It's more proactive.
Knowledge is power, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely. This was a tremendously huge one for me. And I call this one emotional alchemy. Um, I had no idea really what was going on with my inner state until much later. Because again, when I was dropped into this, when I was thrown into the ring with the diagnosis, it's like the medical system kind of takes over and does its thing and wants to do its best to kind of keep you alive. But there is no mind body connection in the traditional model, and the addressing of emotions. And in fact, sadly, I have heard, which is another reason why I do what I do, is that I've heard professionals say to kidney patients, it's normal to be depressed and anxious when you have kidney disease, and almost everybody takes anti-anxiety medication or antidepressants, and you probably should just get on that now. Like it's I've literally heard professionals say this, which blows my mind. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that if you need to do that, but what I'm here to tell you is that there are so many things that you can do, and you may actually need all of them. You may need to do them all, so please do not fall victim to, this is normal, everybody has to take medication on this. When I say medication, I mean for anxiety, depression, antipsychotic no, that's not the case. Is it a difficult thing? Yes. But again, building mental fortitude and understanding how you can work with your emotions are going to be the most powerful thing you can do to navigate consciously a very difficult situation. And that's what
Absolutely.
I'd love to see this offered, at least alongside the other things that they're saying. So emotional alchemy, I have down here, transmuting fear and anger into courage and acceptance. And again, this is not an overnight thing. It's a process.
Mhm.
When you go through something like this, a catalyst like this, and there's so much uncertainty, like with kidney disease, it's very difficult. You don't really understand that everything's going to be on the table. Everything's going to get pulled up. Everything's going to get pulled up and out that you've been suppressing consciously or unconsciously. It's like everything is on the table, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, anger, shame, regret. It's like all of a sudden the stew of your soul is going to be laid out on the table, and you don't know what is going to come up when. Right. So
Yep.
really understanding, I mean, that's just something right there that most people don't talk about enough, is that, this is going to be a roller coaster. But when you say roller coaster, like, what do you mean? Not just, oh, there's going to be things I don't know and it's going to be up and down. No, this is like your deepest guts you're going to come up in this process. It's almost going to be like a really intense purging session that you didn't realize that you were going to have inwardly too. right?
Yeah.
Some people are good at hiding their emotions or their fears, but when you're really compressed and you're facing your own mortality, it usually does come up. Even for the toughest of guys or those who don't really talk about things, it usually does come up. Working to transmute fear and anger into courage and acceptance takes time, but it's something that can be done. And again, it's a
Mm.
little bit of a back and forth. You'll make progress and then you may fall back again, make a little more progress, and then you're pissed off again. Like, give yourself some grace that it's going to take time to move more into courage and acceptance if you're in the initial stages of, fear and anger. But it can happen. And that's definitely part of the emotional alchemy, is learning how to work with your feelings. And you have to feel it to heal it, they say. So for so
Yeah.
many of us, I think that the way that the world is, we don't have a high degree of emotional intelligence. It's like some
No.
people are either really good at faking it and hiding and suppressing their feelings or emotions. Some people are just very unaware and they're just very emotional and all out there. But in terms of, is there something as emotional intelligence and really being aware of your feelings and identifying your feelings and really understanding what's going on? We need a lot of work in that area. In fact,
Mm.
I met with a patient once and we were getting into some of her struggles. She was suffering a little bit mentally. And I sat with her and I said, "Tell me what you're feeling." And she just sat there and looked at me and she said, "I don't know." Like, she could tell she was so frustrated and angry, but she couldn't get down to that deeper, more subtle level of like, where is this coming from? How do you feel? It really was a process for her to say, like, I don't know what I feel. I have to, like, I don't know that I'm feeling. Like, that's how frustrated she was in her mind. It was like this rageful fear and anger. That's like an externalized energy, but you can't really get into emotions are more subtle. They're like
Absolutely.
not that external force of energy, but you have to be willing to be a little more quiet and go in and
Mm.
be open to what comes up. And sometimes it's not, doesn't feel that great, you know but I think emotional intelligence is something that we definitely can work on and will be helpful. So the healing power of vulnerability and authentic connection, I believe, has to do with emotional alchemy. If you're not willing to be honest, again, everything's on the table when you go through something difficult.
Yeah.
You got to stop lying to yourself. If you are, right, you have to be honest. You have to be
Yeah.
willing to be vulnerable. And again, it depends on your constitution. Some people like me, I told you last month about being a recovering people pleaser. So for me,
Yes, yes.
right, part of my process was I need to fight for my own life here. And this is like a very vulnerable process I'm going through. And I realized very quickly, laying in a hospital bed, if I don't tell people the truth about what I'm feeling, how can I even expect to live? I'm dishonoring my body. And I realized intuitively, my body is in this state and I better do everything else I can to fight for my survival and be honest and authentic.
I love
So
that. Yeah.
that's part of the process. That's what I'm saying, is you taking responsibility for what you can do. And usually in those moments of vulnerability, it's contrary to what you're used to doing. It requires you to become somebody a little bit different, but your more authentic self when you go through things like this. So it's changing you and molding you, like, in this process, if you just surrender to what kidney disease or whatever your catalyst is trying to show you on a much deeper level. But you got to kind of sink into that and realize, oh, this isn't physically comfortable, and oh, it's not really going to be mentally or emotionally comfortable either. But if I can commit to what I need to do to be authentic, because that's what my body needs to heal, is I need to at least align with health, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And if I'm not being honest, or I'm betraying my own soul with people or situations, or I'm afraid to speak up or don't want to hurt people, there isn't any room for that when you're fighting for your life. You got to be honest.
Yeah, so well said, Stephanie. Thank you.
Yeah. And the last thing here is embracing the full spectrum as emotions as messengers.
Mhm.
I'm thinking of men here. I know a lot of really amazing men who they get overwhelmed in terms of emotions. And I've heard that in terms of dealing with men, they can get overwhelmed with feeling a little bit more easily than women, because women are used to the constant flow of feelings and cycles and things like that. It's important to know that I always used to say in yoga that your emotions are energy in action. And energy doesn't go away, it just changes form and changes shapes, right? So if you get a wave of a feeling that doesn't feel uncomfortable, it's going to come and it's going to go, but you don't want to suppress it or ignore it because it has a message for you. A feeling is carrying a message. I think too often we can get locked into our feeling states, and then our feeling states start to rule our life, right? And we don't want to be ruled by our feelings, but we do want to pick up on the subtle message, and there's truth in that message. There's some truth in that emotion most often that wants to be seen. And once you allow yourself to feel it, to see it, usually then you can reframe it or take the message from it, and then it will move forward. But for many people, to feel the full spectrum of their feelings is difficult. But I think that if you understand that it's not to overwhelm you, it's not to shame you, a feeling isn't to shame you, it's to give you a message that you maybe haven't seen. And if you can just sit with that and see it, and then you can let it go.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out, we talked about thoughts aren't real, like they're just thoughts. There's no power in them or truth in them apart from the meaning that we give them.
Right.
Emotions are different. Emotions have, like you said, energy in motion. It is a stored energy being released from the body that if we can experience it and acknowledge it, it is transmuted. And if we don't, we just suppress it and we have to go through it again, and it gets more and more chronic. And I think suppressed emotions are a big contributor to chronic disease. So if anyone listening, if they're like, well, are emotions the same as thoughts? Are they lies? I'm like, no, I think emotions, at least for me, and I'd love to hear, the reason I bring this up is I'd like to hear how you explain this, is for me, emotions are a trigger to a greater truth that I've not yet seen. And then once I see it, or I'm misaligned with my truth, that once I can see it and integrate it and allow the emotion, and I work very hard on not suppressing any emotions anymore, I allow it to come up, I feel it, and then I let it go. And that's all about being present and being in the moment, because if I can do that, the emotion's then gone. I don't need to have any thought around it. I don't need to assign meaning. I've experienced it. But I do think, okay, that emotion came up. That's something that I hadn't obviously felt or expressed, and that's why it's been released or it needed to come through. Yeah, so I'd love to hear your thought on that, because I think people get hung up in the spot of, are emotions the same as thoughts when we come to that Zen Buddhist sort of process of going, are emotions not real just like our thoughts, or are emotions different from thoughts and they actually have a deeper meaning, message, and we need to spend more time not thinking, I don't want to say thinking, but leaning into that?
It's a great question. And I've heard this too. There's a lot of confusion between, well, what comes first? Do I have the thought first or the emotion first? Or how does this all work? To answer this very simply, listening to you, something came to me that was nice and simple and concise, is that in terms of how I perceive it, is that the mind, they say it's like you have like a monkey mind, right? In Buddhism, it's a monkey mind. It's always going. There's things just popping in and popping out. Could be yours, could not be yours, could be something you saw, a condition. It's like the mind, to me, that monkey mind reminds me of like a little gremlin. He's always got something to say. He's like on my shoulder. He's always got something to say about something, right? But it's kind of a little bit separate from me, trying to push me towards, I don't know, a fear or whatever it may be. Not all thoughts contribute towards fears, but it feels to me like a thought is like the monkey mind, this little gremlin that's just throwing things in and out of my head to see what I want to latch on to and what I don't. Whereas the emotions feel very deeply personal to me. It's
Mm.
it's it's the deepest parts of me that I can't see, or the deepest parts that's very connected to my physical body, and the things that are so deeply held within me that do affect my physical body. So that's why, like you, for me, it is imperative that I feel my emotions. I went through this process too throughout my illness where part of people pleasing is suppressing your feelings to not disrupt a relationship with someone else. So I realized very early on that that was very unhealthy. And where I realized that was when I first really committed to yoga. And it is not uncommon in the yoga world at all. To have, as a teacher, I've seen this over and over again of people who are new to the practice, who start a committed practice within a couple of weeks to have a complete, I don't want to say mental breakdown, but a sobbing experience on their yoga mat, either before, during, or after class. And they are often oblivious to what is going on. And you and I both know the degree of emotion and how that can affect the subtle body, the fascia, and how tension can be
Mm.
stored in the body. And when these individuals have this emotional release, is really what it is, like an emotional release. Often I'll say, what do you feel? If you want to talk about it? And they'll say very simple things like, I haven't noticed my breath like that in my whole life. Or I haven't had a moment to myself to think in a space that's safe like this since I was 15 years old. They'll come up with something so simple yet so profound to help them realize that they've realized that they have been disconnected from their deeper self. And I
Yeah.
think this is the role of our emotions, is to help to reconnect ourselves with our most authentic, deepest self. And again, it's not always fun and doesn't always
Ah,
feel good to deal with certain emotions. We want to fight it. But again, if you can really see those as a very deeply connected part of yourself that's carrying a message that does contribute to your physical, mental, and further, emotional health, you want to lean into that. Whereas the mind and thoughts to me is more like, not to dismiss the mind or cognitive thinking, because, cognition is important and doing work is important. But this thought process that's always running within the head, to me, just feels almost like a little bit of a false script. And it's just there no matter what. Whereas the emotions are deeply personal, and I think they are there to guide us and really support us to release tension that we may be holding on to.
yeah, thank you for that. That's perfectly said. So I just definitely wanted our listeners to get clear on that because it is a question that comes up a lot, the difference between the two.
Yeah, it's hard to see exactly. To me, I feel like the thought always comes first. And if you entertain a thought that's actually out of alignment with who you are at your core, then it makes me feel like I have bad emotions. I start to
Mm.
feel uneasy. So, one thing that I do is this simple little process where if I've missed the opportunity from a thought, if I've caught a thought that maybe I shouldn't have, and then it leads into this emotion or feeling, which, if we're aware of ourselves, usually these negative feelings all revolve around one or two main core issues, whether it be like relationships or finance or money. Like it always comes down to the same deep, deep fear. But if I've
Mm.
missed the opportunity in a thought, and I've had a thought and I've gone right into entertaining it, even though I know it's not true, and then I'm having now I'm having a negative emotion. What's so interesting is that very soon after that, for me personally, I will start to feel lethargic physically. It
Mm.
almost trickles down. It's like, I didn't catch the thought. Okay, I grabbed onto the thought I shouldn't have. Now I'm not feeling the greatest. Well, now I'm tired. It like immediately starts to translate and cascade down into my whole body. So usually what I do is I'm aware and I say, okay, you know, I'm feeling a little tired, lethargic, like I'm not feeling that great. What's going on? And then I can usually reverse engineer, because I know myself pretty good now, and say, oh, you were afraid about this again. Is that the truth? No, it's not the truth. Okay, then change your thought. Let it go. And it's amazing how quick you can regain physical energy from just doing that little bit of reverse engineering. Is this a true thought? No, it's actually not. Let it go. And you can, it's amazing how the body can actually bounce back when you let go of a negative thought or emotion.
Totally agree. So it's so fascinating. I find this whole thing fascinating.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me too. So, emotional alchemy, everybody, this is a big part of what's going to come up. Don't be surprised if you find yourself crying or you feel
Mhm.
frustrated or angry or emotional. Feel it. Don't suppress it. Please, when you're sick, the last thing we need to do is suppress tension and emotions. Let it arise, journal it, talk about it. Find a mentor, a friend, somebody that you can release that with and share it, write it down, get it out of your body. Don't let it linger in there. So it's been a
Mm.
huge help for me. So, okay, the number 4 I have here about becoming our own self healer is in this physical rebirth that happens no matter really where you're at in your physical process. I feel and I see ourselves as having these subtle bodies of wisdom. So, again, our emotional body, our mental body, our spiritual body, our physical body. So, the physical rebirth I'm talking about here is in regards to honoring your body as a temple of healing. And this is a huge one because for the longest time, when we get sick, we feel like we did something wrong. Now,
Yes. Thank you for
right?
saying that.
Yeah, sometimes maybe we can contribute to things. For instance, if we're really obese and we eat at McDonald's every day, that's a very clear, cause and effect relationship as to why you may be overweight. But in terms of things like autoimmune disease, any sort of trickier disease, you really don't know exactly. You may be confined genetically or hormonally, or you can maybe find a chain link back, but really, very often, your body is fighting for a healing when in medical terms, it looks like something's going wrong. But on a
Mm.
deeper, more subtle level, it's like your body's actually trying to protect you from something. You know what I mean by that?
Yeah. I think, and especially if you're in the personal development world, there's this narrative that I had to be very careful of because I got stuck into it, is that you create your own reality.
Yeah.
And if you're not careful, and I'd love to hear how you navigated that, the subtext of that for some people's thoughts, especially if you're this type A achieving personality, such as myself is, the subtext is then if you create your own reality, you created your illness, and therefore it is your fault. And I think it is, having been and worked with people that teach that model and maybe don't extrapolate enough and been in that world for such an extended period of time,
Yeah.
where I think there is power in saying, okay, then I've got some control around it. Maybe I do create my own reality, so therefore I can create another one. And I get all of that. But I think you've got to be very careful with chronic diseases to go, I create my own reality, and therefore it's my fault. And if you're someone that follows the teaching of the Stoics, and I'm like a huge fan of the Stoics and Marcus Aurelius and stuff, I've got my
Yeah.
Stoic meditations that I do every day. And one of the things that the Stoics are big about is what can you control and what's out of your control. And one of the things they say is your physical body and ailments that come up are out of your control, but what you are in control of is about catching the mind and all these sort of things. And and I think, like, to your point, the body is potentially, and I agree with you, protecting yourself and doing you a favor. And I think the narrative of I created my disease, therefore I'm at fault, I'm wrong, I'm a bad person, what did I do karmically, was it this, there's
Yeah.
all of that. And I have been through all of that, and this is something I still struggle with. I don't think the whole blame game is a great place to be, apart from what do I have control of? I have control, like you mentioned, of what I put in my mouth. I have control of how much I exercise, what supplements I take, and I have control over my thoughts and what I do. And then what don't I have control of? I don't have control at the rate of which my body is going to remyelinate and heal itself. I can give it the best possible environment that I'm aware of at the time with the knowledge that I have to do that. But that's all I have control of. Whether my body decides to pick that up or not, I have to surrender to that. And I think, that self-blame around that personal development narrative can be a dangerous one if you fall into that, because while I believe we potentially create our own reality, I would reframe it to we co-create. And sometimes things come up for us to learn and lesson, and look at what you've been through and how you've transformed out the other end. I go, what a beautiful experience. But when we're in the middle of it, sometimes we have no idea where this is taking us and all of those sort of things. And sometimes we may not in this lifetime transform and overcome, and that's okay too. That doesn't mean you've done something wrong or you didn't get this right or all of those sort of things. And so I just want to bring that up because I know a lot of people in the personal development space hear that statement and spiral and can't shift themselves out of it. So yeah, I'd love to hear how you navigate that, because that does feel part of this physical rebirth. And it was something you said that triggered me to say that. So I interrupted you and I apologize, but I think there's a part of it that I think, yeah, I'd love for you to speak to.
Yeah, so this is a big one for me, and I'm just going to go ahead and speak freely because I know that I'm allowed to in this space, is that I have dabbled in that world of a lot of new age wisdom in my past. And I think that there are some really beautiful concepts in that line of thinking. New thought, you might want to call it new thought over new age. And I do think that we are coming to realize that we are conscious beings. And I think it's part of our epoch right now of we are learning to become self-aware, and we are learning how to do better. And we are learning that, some things actually are within our control that we didn't realize were, and some things still are not in our control. But I have to say that I prescribe to not you create your own reality. I did for a second. But it was out of my own hubris. And I think that there's a lot of ego in that. I certainly don't remember creating this vessel and how all my organs and systems work together. And I certainly don't know how to create a tree. And I certainly don't know how to understand how nature operates. What I do think is good about that movement is really taking as much self-responsibility as possible and understanding that you are a very powerful co-creator of your reality, and that if you let thoughts go that are unhealthy, it is going to affect you and potentially physically at some point. So I think there is some wisdom that can be distilled from that line of thinking. But what I will say is this, is that I'm a firm believer in God. Okay. So I do believe in God. And what I believe and what I've come to realize over my many years working as a holistic health coach and in the healing space is that some of the most magnificent saints of our world suffered with chronic illness and disease. So, so then you have to kind of ask, well, if a saint so close to godliness would be sick, why would that be? Right. So also too, you can bring in the questions of like, well, are you saying that a 10-year-old then, created their own cancer and chose to die? You start to tread on some tricky information. And I've always seen good new agers find some excuse around those things. Right. But how I live my life is this way. To me, illness is an experience within my life that holds profound learning lessons. I understand the reality that at some point our physical vessel is going to pass away, right? That I do believe that our consciousness lives on, but our physical vessel is in the densest form of matter humans have ever known to be. And it's very fallible. It's not meant to be 100% regenerative at this point. We still live on Earth, which is very dense. If we were in another realm, all the time, and the environment were conducive to regeneration, I think that we do have a lot more potential. I do think we do have a lot of potential for regeneration and massive regeneration. I'm just not sure right now if it's here in this space. So I have hope for the future. But as of right now, I perceive my illness as God giving me a very difficult catalyst and lesson for me to learn from. And also to remind me of my humanity, because sometimes in the past I have been quite arrogant in my spiritual knowledge. So nothing will keep you more humble than having a physical illness, and to remind you of your humanity and to be closer to people who suffer. Right. So I've just been watching recently a whole bunch of Mother Teresa videos and some saint videos of these beautiful women who just give their life to help very impoverished, sick children in other countries. And sometimes when I think about some of the New Age movements, I've thought we've gotten a little too high on our own supply here. Like, let's come back down to reality a little bit and realize that different people go through different experiences for different reasons. Yes, we want to be a participant and do all we can and work towards, regeneration and as much health as possible. But when it starts to lean too much into self-realization, self this, self-development, and you realize that, there's people in your own community starving and don't have shoes to get food, it's like, hold on, like, where's the humility and the community and realizing that if we spent some of this money helping other people in the community, maybe we'd feel a little more balanced and in balance. So I would say that's my opinion. I honor my disease. I don't even mind calling it what it was, as it was my greatest lesson of my life. It completely made me who I am. So I have such a deep honor for my experience. And I feel sad when people look at it like there's just something wrong with you and you can take this and regenerate and not have to live through that experience. Well, maybe you've just missed out on your complete rebirth and awakening.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Thank you. I think it's just important to talk to that, because so many people in the PD world get stuck in that and then stuck in victimhood and then can't shift through that. And I agree with what you've said. So yeah, thank you.
And the greatest saints and sages and mystics of the world, when they did have a supernatural healing or mystical experience, the highest goal was to get over it and get back to chopping wood and carrying water. Don't talk about it. So
yes.
this is another thing I realize when you have people that are overly talking about it and focusing on it, it's like, I think they missed the point. Is that maybe you've had a supernatural experience or healing, but the goal is to accept it and then help and to continue to move on with life. Don't just keep trying to float away in the mystical experiences or wherever. Like, it's there to show you something that you couldn't see otherwise. It's not necessarily there for you to become, super high on your own supply and tell everybody that they heal themselves, because that's not always the case.
Yes, and definitely I found in my old community when people would have that, it would be like, well, you're just not trying hard enough. You haven't healed. I'm like, not helpful. And also, to your point, it's just like the high on own supply. I'm like, yeah.
I think it's silly for us to even try to presume that everybody's journey is to be lived in a specific way. Again, for me, my health issues have been what have completely formed my most sparkling crystalline side of me, has been through my illness experience. So I actually, I wouldn't want to change it, because I love and honor who I am today from that experience.
Yeah.
So
yeah, ditto.
Yeah. Let's see. I know we got to move on a little bit with time here. So I just want to read this real quick. So, honoring the body as a temple of healing, seeing and honoring the synergy of the medical and holistic interventions. We talk about that a lot. And seeing in this physical rebirth that even though people aren't offering you all the help that you need, because you're doing your own work, that most people do try to care, which is a good thing. Dialing in and balancing the needs of our body and listening to its wisdom, really important, and finding our balance, endurance, flexibility, and that aspect of listening deeply really helped me to have this rebirth. This is a nice little quote. All experiences are lessons in which God thinks I can learn. I just said that.
You certainly did.
This isn't a Course in Miracles. It's that every experience has something to teach you. And when you resist that and you say, no, it doesn't, I'm going to fix it and overrule it and do what I want to do. Well, I've tried to drive the bus myself many times, and it's often a disaster. So again, if you want to hold that responsibility of believing that you are the sole creator of your existence, then you better be willing to carry that weight when you can't figure out why things aren't going, the way that you need them to go. So, and then we talk about nourishment as medicine. This is a big part of becoming your own self-healer as well. Food is a sacred act of self-love and healing. When I got sick, I couldn't, you know how it is, people with kidney disease, they can't eat as much potassium or phosphorus. They got to watch their foods. So all of a sudden, food became very sacred for me. Having a glass of water, when you're on dialysis, you got to watch your fluids. Having a glass of water became a sacred experience for me. And I think that's another gift of living with a chronic illness or disease, is like, you got to start to really appreciate the little things. You got to look at life differently. Everything has to become a sacred act, from getting a shower with a catheter in your chest to having a glass of water, because it's hot out and you can't drink a lot. Everything can become sacred if you choose to look at it that way, of what you do have. So, and then I talked a little bit about intuitive eating and honoring our body's unique needs. This has to do with nourishment, creating a ritual of mindful nourishment and gratitude, kind of touched on that. And then consciously shifting to what our body's needs are in the moment with love. Again, talking about how I couldn't eat certain things. And then when I was able to eat them again, and how I really honored and appreciated having tomatoes after not being able to have potassium. Like, if you just look at things with a healthy state and a state of gratitude and appreciation, even when it's difficult, everything becomes sacred. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
Back to the self-healer stuff here. So movement as medicine was a big thing for me. Movement as a celebration of my life, finding joy and power in slow restorative movement. So often we're like, we don't feel like we get a workout unless we're killing ourselves. But when I was going through my kidney disease, it was all yin. It was walking and yin, slow movements, mindful movements, gentle meditation, and really honoring, oh my goodness, this is 50% of what a workout should be, is like this working in and this balancing. So that was really great. I talk about that here a little bit, that yin yang refinement. I know we talked about that in past episodes, which I love to talk about. And taking in the miracle of how the human body works, even in this difficult time when we may feel we have been betrayed by it. So that's a huge thing that I had to work on overcoming, which we talked about, is you feel betrayed by your body and people are telling you something's wrong. In my mind, I can see that it looks like it's wrong, but I also have done enough research to understand that usually when medicine thinks the body's doing something wrong, our body's actually doing something to try to protect ourselves, although it may need therapeutic intervention. So it's like the body is actually really trying.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really beautiful thing to say, and important.
Yeah. And then we've got the inner revolution. It's a huge thing about the self-healing journey. Probably the biggest one for me. Again, we're all so physical. We're all such materialists here. And I'm telling you, when you do the inner work, it's like all of a sudden you wake up to that the fact that you've been living at 50% of your capacity. is
Yeah.
like, wait, I got this whole inner state. Like I've only ever been focused on like this and what's out there, you know?
Yeah.
So this has been my greatest gift. And when you start to understand your inner state, that's really when your self-healership and like really the sovereignty of like, wow, I can navigate this thing. Like, yes, I've got some doctor's helps, but like, I got this. Like, this is mine. You know, I love this. I love this body of mine. So, challenging our limiting beliefs and self imposed boundaries. We talk about that a lot. Radical self compassion and acceptance in the present moment. Trying to stay present is important when you have any difficult catalyst, again, because the mind will want to make up a story if you go in the past or you're worried about the future. So really doing the mindfulness to stay present, but really that's all any of us have, you know. And then discovering the power of our inner senses. I used a lot of visualization and healthy intention. And again, really tapping into my inner senses when I was going through my kidney disease as well. And I still do. You know, they're powerful. You know, I remember I got so ill before I started dialysis that I was in a wheelchair because I was getting like 1,000 milligrams of Medrol IV drips like every other week because I was in bad shape. And my quadriceps completely atrophied from so much prednisone and steroids. I mean, I don't know if anyone listening has experienced that before, but sometimes high doses of steroids can atrophy the quadricep muscle. And I was in a wheelchair and I was thinking to myself, you know, I was in my early 20s and I was a yoga teacher. And I thought, all right, what am I going to do? Sit and feel bad about myself? Like, what can I do? So I would sit there and I would visualize my entire yoga practice. And do you know that it, it, I honestly felt like it helped me as much as doing it. I got
Well,
that.
there've been studies to show that that's true.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I remember that very vividly. I visualized the entire like 1 hour practice. And I'm telling you, when you think you can't do something, and if you can't physically do it in your mind. Do it in your mind. Self-healership has a lot to do with really spiritually awakening. Again, illness for me was a doorway to a much deeper meaning in my life and purpose. Really was a doorway. Complicated doorway, but again, one that was given to me. It helps you to connect with universal energy, transcendent energy, God energy, and just the power of healing. You know, when you really just let go and finding the true power of surrender and trust. So this is, you know, some of my core issues, and I think what my kidney disease has taught me the most, which I still work on, is patience. That's one of my biggest issues. Patience, divine timing, and just surrender, let go, stop asking why this happened to me. You know, just let go. It's happening. It's here. And can you just trust in it? Can you trust in what you can see? And then we're almost done. This is the alchemy of habits, talking about creating rituals to honor your current experience. Again, honoring it, not fighting it. That's the basic thing I want to say. The power of micro changes and consistency throughout my process really helped me to really kind of level up that self-healership within myself. Really appreciating little things that I would do that would make a change. Little changes, you know, not always seeking that huge, massive change, but making little micro changes. And then for me, really being consistent, creating new patterns, right? And then building a sanctuary of support in my daily life. I actually built a little ritual space within my house where I know I could sit. I had some candles and I could just be by myself in my space. But then also, and you and I talked about this at length last time, is you need to build a sanctuary of relational support in your daily life. And when I went through my illness, I did not have that the first go round. I didn't realize how discombobulated the life I kind of created was. Like there was a lot of misalignments based off of my fears and my people pleasing. And so again, really going through my illness helped me to say, all right, Stephanie, you got to get it right this time.
Well, it's, and that's such a big thing because it is, and I think to the point that you've spoken about so many times is the medical community is like, you've got to go get them, kid. You've got your new transplant, off you go. And you miss exactly what you just said, which is that how do I create my world and what I need to do myself? So, not that I don't have to go through it again, but how do I, maximize what I've learned out of this and all those sort of things? And the fact that you had the self-awareness enough to go, okay, I need to do this differently. I don't want this lesson to come back around in another form, is such a big thing and such a brave thing to see, because it would be very easy to go, I'm cured and I'm going to fall back into the patterns that, again, I've subscribed to exactly how you described disease. It's not like how I created my reality, but I can fall back into the patterns, and maybe a disease doesn't come up, but maybe I'm not feeling fulfilled or happy or all of those things, rather than seeking the opportunity to be a phoenix, as you've got here, and recreate yourself out of the flame. So this is
Yeah.
brilliant, because this is completely leading on to what I'm just saying here.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think the biggest disservice that the Western medical model here, at least that I have experience, can tell their patients is get back to your life. And again, I'm not saying that, I'm not specifically saying that something you were doing contributed to your illness, but what I'm saying is I think that illness is riddled with new opportunities and gifts, riddled
Yeah.
with it. And to just completely neglect that, again, it's a representation collectively of where our medical model is at within their own conscious development. There's no emotional, spiritual, there's just none. It's all completely often void of understanding that experience. And really, unless you've lived something where you've faced your mortality and you've ongoing have had to face very deep complications, obvious, you just don't really get it. You don't really know how to deal with it. So yeah, so if you can embrace, how do I get this better? How do I get this right now? Then
Yeah.
I think we can have this little phoenix rising. So embracing your role as the sculptor and the clay, as we talked about, like the co-creator, right? You kind of can do both, the ripple effect, how you walk your journey and inspire others is awesome. No matter if you're recovered or not, if you've developed the mental and emotional fortitude and that spiritual depth, you impact people. And I know people who don't make it out alive who have such a presence of spiritual mastery that it's like, oh my gosh, look, like I can learn so much from this person. So again, we're so focused on the physical. And yes, we want to stay alive as long as we can. That is a very important part of it. But start opening the eyes broader, start looking
Mm.
beyond and really like understand, like, wow, like look at what this person has become through this experience, all of these different levels. So kidney disease can be your greatest teacher, as it was for me. Gives you can build resilience, courage, truth, and self-discovery. You don't want to be that victim. Yes, you can feel sorry for yourself a little bit. It's traumatic, we understand, but at some point realize that your mindset means everything. And then for me, this has helped me to grow closer to God and universal love and unconditional love, and knowing how to handle certain people, knowing when to walk away, knowing when to speak up. I mean, it's just, I don't know, connected me to a spiritual truth that is so above and beyond what materially we're used to living in, to where I completely honor my condition. I completely honor where I'm at. I'm at peace in the moment. I have inner peace, not knowing if I have inner peace in not knowing. Let's just say that. And that's a
But
major, major
that's
thing.
fast. Yeah, that's a big black belt in judo jiu-jitsu right there.
Right, right. Yeah, sadly, none of us are making it out alive. And I
No.
really feel that it's like you die before you die, and then you truly live. And I think that's what happened, is that I died. It was a very spiritual experience to me this whole time. It's like I really died to my false self, my protective self, my inner child self that was so afraid. And I've helped her to grow up. And I've accepted the paradox of life and death together through this journey. It's been very hard, but when you're not afraid of death anymore, you're free. And your life is just like, you're free. You are literally set free. And I would have not gotten this freedom, this inner freedom, any other way.
What a beautiful gift.
Yeah. That's it for today.
I love it, Stephanie. Thank you. What a thoughtful presentation for people to go and ponder about the alternative ways of viewing a disease, and kidney disease in particular. And it's not to say that everybody's going to go through that and see the miracles every day. You know, I've got my own chronic disease, and some days everything you said, I'm like, yep, I can do it. And then other days I'm like, really? Like, I'm in pain today, and walking over there is really hard. And this is silly because I do all this stuff. Why am I still like this? You know, and it's that nuance every day, and that dance, and to be able to self-regulate and bring yourself back, and all of those sort of things. And so, you know, I definitely subscribe to illness is a greatest gift. And I think anyone listening, you know, the big key takeaways, that the things that you have control over, and, you know, to your presentation, physical nourishment, mind nourishment, spiritual nourishment, they're all things that we have control over. And then the ability to surrender over the things that we don't, and to know potentially, like you say, there's a bigger journey in here, and we can't possibly know what that is or what that looks like. And the ability to surrender into the not known is probably, I think, for anyone, illness or not, it's probably one of the hardest things they'll ever do. But if you listen to people like Alan Watts and the old teachings of the Stoics and the yogis and the Eastern philosophy, that is the goal to life, is to be able to surrender into the unknown, because every infinite possibility lives in there. And our mind goes, well, it's going to look like this, and can you but we actually don't know.
Yeah, you know, what you just said reminded me a lot of a couple of years ago. I went through this experience where I felt like I was connecting to this quantum field. And what that was my ability to let the thoughts go, to where I had mental space, a degree of mental space where I could just simply connect with that space. And at some point I realized very deeply, like, wow, this, like, it felt like the field of potential, but so many of us are just covered up with layers upon layers upon layers of fears and thoughts and conditioning in day-to-day life. And it's like the mind doesn't have that space to really connect with this broader possibility. And mindfulness is a really great tool for starting to just simply have some space between your thoughts, like just appreciate some time between the thoughts, and just starting there is a good space. But, you know, we're talking about big things. You know, it's strange because it is like a paradox. And again, a paradox isn't comfortable really either, but talking about life and death is very, very difficult. But if you can somehow just go through that hell and just realize that at some point, you know, life is going to be different. We're all going to have to surrender to that unknown. If you can find a way to surrender to that unknown now, again, it's like your soul and your mind is completely free, and there's no worry and there's no fear anymore. But it is probably the hardest life lesson to learn.
100%. And I think, again, regardless if you've got a disease or not, I think that's what everyone's seeking, is that freedom.
Yeah. Exactly. I think we see that play out so much externally, and we see the wars go on, and we see we're fighting for freedom. We're fighting for freedom. And I think at the end of the day, going through my experience, I don't think we can find that freedom until we find it within.
100%. I totally subscribe to that.
Yeah. Thank you
Stephanie,
so
thank
much.
you. No, thank you. And if anyone's listened to this and thinks, I really need to connect with Stephanie because I need some help being able to navigate that, I'll put her details in below. You can also find her on the coaching page on www.kidneycoach.com. If you go down and drop onto resources, you'll see there's a link there to be able to book in with Stephanie. If you want to know more about her, I'll put in her own profile page underneath. Stephanie, thank you for being part of our community. I'm always so grateful that we have you and you're able to help guide and navigate other people moving through kidney disease. Make sure you hit subscribe and like. That way you'll get notified anytime we put up new content. Stephanie, I catch up once a month to do some content. If there's anything you would particularly like Stephanie or a topic that you'd like her to speak to, as you can probably tell if you've listened to any of the past podcasts, she is a wealth of knowledge around all of this sort of stuff. And so anything in specific you'd like her to cover, please let us know and we'll be sure to add it to the list. We look forward to seeing you in our next podcast together. Stephanie, thank you again. Really grateful for who you are and what you bring to the table. And I look forward to chatting to you next time. And to everyone listening, thank you for being part of our community. We'll see you next time. Bye.